Back with us now, NBC's Steve Patterson, also joining us, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC political analyst Glenn Kirshner. Steve, we just got a lot of new details there. Walk us through what we learned.
Well, first, I think we have to talk about the impact of this news conference, which was designed what it was designed to do and was as impactful as possible, which was to be as direct and as heartbreaking and as maddening as possible, because it describes this pattern, this network of people that saw a man with a disease, saw him falling off the wagon, and instead of picking him back up, tried to exploit him as much as possible before he died. That's what federal prosecutors are alleging with these complaints. 5 people listed in this document, all 5 of them with knowledge that they knew what they were doing and that they knew what they were doing was very, very wrong. 2 of them were thought to be medical doctors. These are people that wore white coats and swore an oath to do, no matter what, no harm to people, to protect people. But in this document, it is listed, and what you heard in this press conference, there's just this pattern, according to prosecutors, that they over and over again were exploiting Matthew Perry for money, including one text message where this medical doctor listed as Dr. P, a defendant in this complaint, as saying, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." There are points in this document that list every single injection leading up to his death, 6 times on the 24th, the 25th, the 26th, the 27th, and then on his death on the 28th, when it talks about sort of the final time that he drew breath and the dosage and the distribution that led to Matthew Perry's death. It is sickening. It's hard to read. I think at points it was hard to listen to, and I think that's what prosecutors wanted us to hear, that they will not suffer the distribution that leads to people's death. And I think they wanted to make a clear message and a clear example out of a very high-profile case. And I think they've done that here. This is was quite difficult, I think, at points to listen to, especially when it came to the doctors, but also this woman who was described as a drug dealer, the ketamine queen of Los Angeles, who was not only described as delivering the final dosage that killed Matthew Perry, but also another victim who apparently died the same day that he got the dosage from this woman, and that she continued to deal and continued to deal. And so I think in outlining this, they've laid out a pretty clear case, including the co-conspirators listed, the assistant to the medical doctor that is described as a defendant, the assistant to Matthew Perry, and then this distributor, the middleman, kind of connecting all of this and making these deliveries at several points before his death. Hard to hear, heartbreaking to hear, but I think important to hear from federal prosecutors who wanted to get this message across as they deliver these charges.
Glenn, this involves so many different agencies, local, state, federal law enforcement, and they did quick work here. Again, this was a death that happened in October of 2023. So here we are now, fast forward less than a year later. You have multiple defendants, a laundry list of charges, and all the details laid out at the press conference and in the indictment itself, leading to the charges that include distribution of ketamine resulting in death, even possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine. So wide-ranging charges here. What do you make of these charges, and how did the prosecutors, you think, decide to bring them in a case like this?
Yeah, so first of all, Anna, it's law enforcement at its best when multiple agencies, state, federal, local, you heard from the postal inspectors, the DEA, local law enforcement, when they work together and they work together well, so much good can be done. Really, it multiplies exponentially the amount of good that can be done in these sort of wide-ranging criminal cases. And this is a wide-ranging criminal case. I have the 34-page indictment in front of me, but I have to be honest, I'm still working on count number 1, which is the conspiracy to distribute ketamine. And the prosecutors had the grand jury indict 78 overt acts. That is 78 acts that the co-defendants, the co-conspirators undertook in furtherance of the conspiracy. And it really is chock full of evidence. And building on what Steve just said, you know, the prosecutor, the career prosecutor in me, when I hear that a medical doctor, defendant Placentia, is quoted as saying, about Matthew Perry, their victim. I wonder how much this moron will pay. That's coming from a doctor who is now a criminal defendant in a drug case that resulted in death of one of his de facto patients. That's the kind of thing that will get a jury's blood boiling for so many reasons. The other thing that is a little bit of a curiosity, Anna, that I want to clear up is there are only two defendants in the caption of this case, meaning two defendants are charged in this indictment. And then the other defendants, because we've heard there are 5 charged, are discussed as co-conspirators. But there's a little Easter egg in the caption of this indictment. It is captioned the first superseding indictment. What does that mean? That means the grand jury returned a prior indictment, which must still be under seal by order of the court, probably that indicted the other co-conspirators who are mentioned in this document, but technically not indicted in this document. So I think we're going to see more documents released publicly in the very near future about some additional acts undertaken by all of these co-conspirators.
I mean, the details, the examples they gave as far as the evidence that they have, Glenn, talking about how these defendants knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing was potentially harmful, was dangerous, and yet they were so motivated by profits. How do we know they were motivated by profits? Well, the text message that you just read, the "I wonder how much this moron will pay," or the evidence that they said was an example when they provided ketamine that and they charged him $2,000 for what would typically be $12 worth of ketamine. The Google search by the defendant known as the Ketamine Queen, asking, can ketamine be listed as a cause of death? How incriminating is this evidence?
Not just incriminating, it's the kind of thing that will resonate with jurors in the event this case goes to trial. Now, anytime you have a conspiracy that involves 3, 4, 5, 6 people, there are 5 charged here. We don't know how many others might have agreed to cooperate with prosecutors during the course of the investigation such that they will never become charged defendants. But when you have this kind of a conspiracy, you often have people who decide rather than take their chances at trial, they're going to come in and cooperate and try to cut their losses. But if this case goes to trial, when jurors hear about doctors who are supposed to abide by the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, talking about how much money can we get from this moron patient of ours, and then ratcheting up fees, ultimately resulting in the death of Matthew Perry and another individual, as we learned in this indictment. That's the kind of case that will land and will land solidly when prosecutors are presenting this evidence to a jury. And mind you, this is not only a speaking indictment, Anna, it's a picture indictment. There are photographs embedded in the indictment of, for example, the drugs and stacks of $100 bills. So it seems to be a pretty powerful case.
Well, thank you both very much. Steve, Glenn, I appreciate you joining us with that breaking news coverage. And